Okay, good to go then. Day 2, here we go. So, skip that. But, chapters 3 and 4, that's what we're covering today. Sorry for my fast clicking. So I'll remind you all of my guiding question as I think about grading and as I looked at this book. I'm always really in everything I do, trying to think about what's best for all students. So I want to keep that in the forefront of your mind. And I also want to bring back this quote from last week. It was in chapter 1. Feldman said, "As we learn new ideas, let us be open, humble, honest, and forgive ourselves if we weren't aware that things could be different." There's so much there in those 4 things to think about as we are looking at this topic of grading and trying to think about grading practices and being more equitable. We're going to start right away, actually, with a breakout group and some reminders about factors for success. If someone would please quickly take on the role of facilitator, really just to be the person that calls on who will go next to keep it moving and take advantage, maximize the time that you are together. If someone would take on the role of the timekeeper, no watch here, but I'll pretend timekeeper, and watch for, if I say like that's about 2 minutes each, to give them a little warning to finish up. And for each of you to take generous authority with that to make sure that we are taking advantage for and making it equitable for all in the group. And finally, if you are able to have your video on and unmute yourself when you come in. And then when you're answering the question, just when you start your turn, that's when you should start by introducing yourself to the group. Say who you are, where you are, what you do if you want to, and then move into your answer. Okay? All right, so now to the important stuff. We are going to have, for discussion question number 1, a reflection on your reading up to this point, even for those of you who've read ahead. So whatever you've read so far, what has changed, challenged, or confirmed your thinking? Okay, so welcome back. Hope that was a good conversation. We're going to have 5 breakout groups today. So that's a lot of opportunity to talk and think about what we're being presented with. So moving on, I'm going to be covering chapters 3 and 4, part 2, this whole section of part 2, he calls it the case for change. And so it was good that you were thinking about what maybe changed your thinking. As a matter of fact, if you would like to start using that chat, is there anything that has changed your thinking at this point already? One thing that has changed your thinking. If you would post that to the chat right now, and I'll give you I'm going to stall for about 30 seconds. People could start to type, but as I move forward, if you're still finishing that up, don't feel stressed. Just go ahead and finish that up. Could be interesting for others to read about what has already changed their thinking just from the introductory chapters. Thanks for posting, those that are posting. I'm looking forward to reading what people are posting there. So I'm going to move on. So the beginning, what we looked at last week was these 20th century beliefs, the things that were informing education in the past. And people used to believe that student achievement should be on a curve. Students should be motivated through extrinsic rewards and consequences, and that the key purpose of schools was to sort students. And now in the 21st century, our beliefs have changed some because we have learned more. We have such incredible technology that has helped us learn about the brain, and learning is super fascinating. And what we know now, based on the researchers, is that all students are capable of meeting our academic standards. The extrinsic motivation, it is good for rote behaviors, but intrinsic motivation is a lot better for higher order thinking. And lastly, schools should not sort students. Yet, so we've made all these changes in our beliefs, we've learned more things, but our grading systems haven't changed much. And there's no meaningful research to support that, according to Marzano. So chapter 3 covers kind of 2 core things: how traditional grading stifles risk-taking and supports the commodity of grades. So we're going to start with the risk-taking, trust, and the teacher-student relationship. And really thinking about, how do we build trust as teachers as educators, what do we do with our students to build that trust with them? Most of us work on positive relationships and the interactions that we have with them to build that trust. And John Hattie's research shows that having positive teacher-student relationships is a 0.55 effect size on learning, which is higher than the average learning effect size of 0.4. Hattie says it is teachers who have created positive teacher-student relationships that are more likely to have the above average effects on student achievement. And if that's our goal, to improve student achievement, we have to work on improving student-teacher relationships. And when we do that, the things that improve are engagement, motivation, and academic achievement. Lots of researchers were cited by Feldman in this chapter. Positive teacher-student relationships, they help students feel safe to take risks and make mistakes. Yet when we grade everything throughout the learning process, the students feel judged, pressured to be perfect, anxious, and overwhelmed. Feldman says, the message when everything is included in the grade is clear. You are always being judged and must show your absolute best performance in every respect, academic and non-academic, every day. If you make a mistake, or even are just having a bad day, it's going to count against you. There is no room for error, no safe place to make mistakes. I'm going to read that last part again. If you make a mistake or even are just having a bad day, it's going to count against you. There is no room for error, no safe place to make mistakes when kids are judged with grades every day. So grading can undermine that teacher-student relationship, leading to distrust. And when that happens, deceit goes up. There's more copying and cheating. And shame goes up, which creates avoidance. Those kids that totally ignore their grades and don't turn things in because they don't want to deal with it. Feldman says, most of us enter teaching to build meaningful relationships with young people, to engender in them a sense of trust and safety by accepting mistakes along a path to proficiency. But our traditional grading encourages us to judge nearly everything a student does or does not do. And we create pressure cooker classrooms where no mistake goes unpenalized. I'm going to repeat that part. We create pressure cooker classrooms where no mistake goes unpenalized. So we're going to move into our second breakout group already because you asked for more. So we're going to have 4 people for 8 minutes. That's about 2 minutes each. Again, here's the question. It will also be pushed out into your discussion rooms and put in the chat. The question is, how does the element of trust in the student-teacher relationship influence a student's approach to the learning process, particularly for historically underserved student populations? Think about who those groups are in your school. And how does our traditional grading impact that trust? So Morgan, if you could send those folks out into those discussion rooms for this question.
I'm just going to mention you have 8 minutes. That's 7 minutes on the timer with a 1-minute warning. So when you see the warning, you still have another minute to finish your time, finish your discussion. You don't have to zoom back. Okay.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Great.
With that.
Counting down in their head like I am right now. Oh, now I lost count because I talked. I feel like that was 10 seconds, Morgan. Was it?
You're good. You should be good to go. We are recording.
And you're recording. Okay. So if you heard somebody share something that kind of surprised you and you thought it was really interesting, you're like, whoa, I hadn't thought of that. Would you type that into the chat for others as well? And I'm just going to give you a little bit of wait time to think and start to post. And if you don't have anything, you don't have to post anything. Okay, so keep posting in the chat as things come up for you. And moving on with chapter 3, in the second part of chapter 3, he talks about the commodity of grades and extrinsic motivation. And so something that this makes me think about as I was reading this chapter is wondering, how did grades get so valuable? So grading throughout schooling, if we think about early elementary, later elementary, and middle and high school, when kids are in early elementary, the teacher feedback is verbal and it's encouragement and supportive and some corrections and some reflection. And then later in elementary school, that teacher feedback shifts to kind of more of a currency of points for categorizing kids and tracking their achievement. And then middle and high school, grading kind of becomes this economic system where points are given with incentives and penalties. And I know this isn't true in every school. So Feldman says that these point economies are a vital incentive and feedback mechanism to help students successfully meet class expectations. This is what many teachers actually do believe. But using points to motivate assumes that extrinsic motivation is most effective to promote learning. Remember Skinner from the 1960s and behaviorism, the rat experiments? So yes, we can give you a little treat and you might do it, and that's going to work for rote learning. But our understanding of motivation has evolved. Extrinsic motivation, it does work for those menial, repetitive tasks, but not for higher order thinking and creativity, which is what we want our kids to do. So learners throughout schooling, they start out school so curious and they have this innate interest in learning and growing. And somewhere, for some kids, in middle school maybe, or in high school, it becomes all about the points. How many points is this worth? And there's this bargaining over points and pleading not to lose points or requests for extra credit. And so it becomes this system that instead of encouraging kids to learn, they're encouraged to go for points. Instead of encouraging them to be curious and joyful about learning, they're just trying to get the A. So the teacher sort of becomes, this is what Feldman says, the Federal Reserve of the classroom, where they can print more currency if they want to. They can inject more points into that classroom economy when needed. He says that we preach the gospel of learning, but we make students genuflect. We make them bow down to the altar of points. And points then equal power in the middle and high school levels, and that power is held by the teacher. So the teacher's grading position of power decreases student trust and risk-taking. We often use that extrinsic motivation of points even more with students from low-income families who have struggled academically, who have been historically underserved. And we try to bribe them with points. But these points, that only creates this illusion of engagement and motivation. Dr. Marjorie Ginsburg said, using only extrinsic motivation incentives to inspire learning is a form of educational engineering that implicitly views students as inferior, inert, and in need of motivation. Such an orientation dims our awareness of learners' own determination and promotes their dependency at a time when we're trying to get them to be independent. Feldman talked about the fact that a lot of teachers will complain that students only care about points, or we wish we had more trusting relationships with students, but he says our approach to grading may be to blame. And we're to another discussion. I told you there was gonna be a lot of discussions today. So question number 3, again, you're gonna have 4 people in there, you're gonna have 8 minutes. Thinking about grades, percentages, points, how effective is the use of grades, percentages, points for students who are the least motivated and engaged? How might the use of points, the addition and subtraction throughout a student's day, affect those students' relationships with adults and their self-concept about whether school is for them? So again, I'm asking you to focus on the students who are the least motivated and engaged. Okay, Morgan, send them away.
All right, again, 7 minutes on the clock plus a minute warning. You'll know when there's just a minute left and you do not have to rush back. All right, good luck.
Thank you. Okay, so welcome back. I don't know about the rest of you, but this particular question sits really heavy on my heart when I think about my students who are least motivated and least engaged, and I think about the impact of grades and percentages and points on those kids and what that does to them as they move forward in life beyond our school system. It makes me sad. If you want to post your own personal thoughts about this particular topic, feel free to do that in the chat. It's tough. I feel for these kids, and I feel for the ones that the school system, the grading system is not set up in a way to help them believe in themselves and become learners, which is really our goal. Final words from chapter 3 was a quote from Dr. Comer. He said, no significant learning occurs without a significant relationship, and that relationships should take priority over grading. That's what I think. Chapter 4 moves into looking at traditional grading and how it hides information, invites biases, and provides misleading information. So traditional single letter grades can be overly complicated with what's underneath them, and actually, depending on the percentage system, actually use inappropriate mathematics. There's idiosyncratic teacher hacks that they do to their grade books, especially in our technological systems that we're using today. And there's a lot of variance and unreliability from teacher to teacher that creates frustrations for students. And so that's what chapter 4 explores. So like, here's an example of the grading scale at my school. And so a student who walks away with an A or a B, with many of our teachers, that is not just content knowledge. It also includes skills and behaviors and subjectivity and bias. So typical teacher also adds grading categories to that letter grade that we don't see with that final grade. So there's categories for homework and tests and projects and classwork and activities and participation. Some teachers have a zillion categories, some have just a few. The problem with these grades is that they often can show a flawed lens when the behavior is included. So it's not just what the teacher observes and puts into the grade book, but how she interprets what she observes. So some examples. So a teacher takes off points because a student wasn't talking during group work. Did the teacher look at the wrong time? Was the teacher not looking when the kid did speak? If a student's interrupting, a teacher takes points off for interruption, but is this disrespect or is this engagement? Was the student excited to talk about whatever the topic was? And maybe a student was doodling during lecture and so the teacher took off points, but is that off-task behavior or focused behavior? Because some people do some incredible learning through doodling. So we have to think about, too, the implicit bias that we all bring, our assumptions and beliefs that we bring to our thoughts about how students learn and our subject areas. And all of these things color our interpretation of that person's action. Things like education, students, families, their appearance, their culture, their gender, the things that we don't even realize we are judging some of our students on. Feldman shares that white teachers can misinterpret African-American students' behaviors, incorrectly believing them to be signs of disrespect or stemming from some evil intent, or judging it to be inappropriate because the teacher comes from a different cultural background in which that behavior is less familiar or accepted. Then there gets to be some subjective awarding or subtracting for points on this behavior, and that stigmatizes students and harms their academic success. And there's research on this that was cited by Feldman as well. He says if we can't stop our implicit biases, which we can't just stop without understanding them, can teachers, particularly for those of us who are white teachers, limit the opportunities to perpetuate inequities through our racial biases? So the first step is self-awareness. We have to do the learning ourselves. We have to understand who we are as people, as in our particular ethnicities and our cultures and where we come from. We've got to understand ourselves, and then we have to understand our students. And that takes time and effort. And then once we understand that, the second step is to reconsider our policies within our classroom, within our school systems that invite bias to operate. So again, we're to another breakout discussion. So thinking about your school and the teachers at your school, and you don't have to say any names, what confidence or uncertainty do you have that two teachers in your school in the same subject, same level, would assign the same grade to a student? And why is that? With what biases might this be connected? Thinking about your school, your teachers, your student population. So we do have a lot of people with different experiences here. This is a little bit shorter. I'm just asking you to reflect on this for about 1 minute each. Welcome back. If you are someone who does like to post things in the chat, and thanks to those who have, there's some really great insights in there already. What are the biases that you are seeing here in your neighborhood, in your school? What are those biases? And they may be different from Southern Maine to Northern Maine. So if you also want to post kind of your general area, what kind of biases are we seeing that get in the way with teacher grading sometimes? So Feldman moves on in this chapter and he talks about the omnibus grade, that grade that has too much information in one small container for those schools who are doing a letter grade. He talks about teachers trying to be clear with their grading and using weighting categories to try to make things even out, or adjusting point values. But how these things, these little things that teachers do, actually create inflated grades and deflated grades. It's not just an issue one way or the other. Here's an example, and this is in the chapter, and some of you have read this chapter and seen this. He's got these two students, Tangela and Isabel, and they both have a 74%, which is their total weighted percentage. So Tangela always turns her work in on time. She's very studious, but she doesn't really do so well, especially on the test. She's got like a 60% score on her tests and projects. So her grade is actually inflated by her work ethic. Her grade does not represent what she can actually do. And then Isabel, on the other hand, she's often late with her work, and but does really well on the summative assignment. So her homework kind of laid in a low score, and participation is kind of a lower score, but she scores like 90% on tests and projects. She's got the same grade. It's a 74%. And so her grade is deflated by her work ethic. So compliance is rewarded over competence in these cases. Tangela's academic weaknesses are overshadowed by her work ethic. And I have seen this in my grading practices in the past too, so that she doesn't get the support she needs when her grade is showing higher capability than what she's actually doing, because she does all the work, even though it's not all correct. Isabel, on the other hand, learns it's not about what you know, but what the teacher wants. And so she sort of becomes less engaged and less invested. So Feldman also talks about the grading hacks that teachers do when we kind of see this. So we try to manipulate our grading programs, and we'll retroactively make changes to students' scores. We'll like dropping the lowest test score, or selectively averaging scores, or creating extra credit, or curving up scores, or bumping up for effort and growth, or doing that end of term fudging because we think a kid should have a different grade than what the grade board actually added together. Feldman says the problem is that each teacher solves for weaknesses in our software and our dysfunctional omnibus grade design in unique ways, guided by individual beliefs about what motivates students and what aspects of a course are most important. Different levels of technical know-how and comfort with grading software, and diverse ideas about what students need to learn and how. So many factors go into how teachers try to adjust their grading. So the constraints of our traditional grading system, plus the well-intentioned grading decisions by teachers and all of their beliefs that are a part of that, equal this grade variance from teacher to teacher, even the same subjects and the same levels, and an unreliability in those grades. So the impact of that is that it makes it very difficult for students to navigate. It's a challenge for some kids to keep track of the differences between their teachers and what their teachers are asking them to do, and their expectations, and how they're grading, and the percents and the weighting. It creates an uncertainty and a confusion for students. And students get misplaced in course levels up or down if they had a deflated or an inflated grade. And it also creates sort of a distrust among colleagues when one teacher's grading one way and another's grading a different way. What specifically defines teachers with reputations as hard or easy graders? So you're going to look at both of those. We're not going to worry about the teachers in the middle right now. Just focus on the hard and the easy graders, those reputations. And then think about, how do students react when they have hard teachers? And how do students react when they have easy teachers? And the most important question to get to, how does this impact learning? And what does it suggest? A good way to get ideas and brainstorming. So I want to spend a little bit of, just a little couple minutes looking at what people posted. And you can see that as well on your own, but for our people watching the video. So we have in the hard graders, what are hard grading teachers like? What defines that? And somebody said it's not clear how to get a good grade with hard teachers. Students avoid hard graders in high school. Hard with love and respect and support versus hard equals disrespectful. A banking model of teaching. Students will work hard for a hard teacher if they can get their love, or give up and feel disrespected and that it's not achievable. A lot is dependent on students' personality and style and level of differentiation and level of clarity. Who see John Hattie? Yes. Points taken off for every little thing, the amount of homework, the late points, how the teacher approaches behavioral issues, whether or not the teacher scales or not, no room for error, no flexibility, and it may include things that are not about the grading standard, like hard deadlines and harsh policies. Whew. And the easy graders, you guys posted that they're hard to understand why they get the grade they do. Easy can mean two things: clear expectations, and organized and supportive versus disrespectful, condescending, not holding a high standard and expectation, the offering of extra credit, not even sure that the teacher reads the work, everyone gets the same grade, feels like you don't have to try for that teacher, questions are easily Googled, and then it says, not necessarily, you have to think about this. I'm not necessarily correlates with easy grading. Grades are scaled. I guess that was a comment. So there's a scale. Work is multiple choice, not open-ended. Anonymous has disagreed again. Flexibility, lack of deadlines, accepts late work. There's more likely to be flexible and willing to work with students to understand and get work done. And so the different viewpoints of both kinds of teachers, and that probably varies by the student. And then the student reactions to the hard graders. They feel like they can never succeed. It will affect their GPA. Somebody's hard teacher can be somebody's easy teacher. Students give up. I'm done. What's the point? Distracting behaviors may increase. There's avoidance. There's no risk-taking, more time on work, increased cheating, less likely to go for extra help. Students lose confidence in themselves as learners. The fear is the motivator to learn, and it's ineffective, depending on the behavior, pleaser versus rebellious student. And student reactions to easy graders, they don't have a lot of respect for them. Students don't put much value on what they're learning in this class. They take advantage, put off the work. They can be excited about school and feel successful. And so as we get to these later ones, what we know is that because the time was a little messed up with the Padlet not working at first, groups may not have made it very far to these last ones. And really such an important question is, how does this grade variance from easy teachers to hard teachers impact learning? And so we have a few posts here that impacts confidence, perhaps either up or down, no confidence or overly confident. And it promotes playing the game when there are inconsistencies in assessment practices and between classes. And I think that's a really, really good point. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to, we're down to fewer participants at this point in time. Maybe we could have just a couple of people share out on that last most important question, since our groups weren't able to get there, and you just need to speak, unmute and speak, because can't see everybody. What is the impact on learning with this grade variance with the easy and hard teachers? Anybody willing to speak out to that?
It's just confusing for kids.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Alberto. Anyone else? We get maybe two more thoughts.
Sometimes I feel like hard hard and easy grading is like more about whether or not the teacher like likes the student than it is actually about their performance. Sometimes, at least that's how I know it felt to me as a student, and how I've heard my students articulate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Katya. And can we get one more brave soul to share on this idea of the impact on learning?
I think it's kind of ends up being lost opportunities to learn, because I know my students, if they think they have a teacher who doesn't read their work or is just going to give them everybody an A, they don't even put the effort into their assignments, and they take away a lot less if they don't think the teacher cares about what they're doing and has a desire to have them learn.
That is such a good point. Lost opportunities.
Yes.
Thank you. And I always, the word opportunity, like that's for me, the things we provide our kids in class, it's all about opportunity, and sometimes grades take away from that. So I want to close with an Albert Einstein quote, who says, any intelligent fool can make things bigger and more complex. And I think about that with our grading, that sometimes that's what we do with our grading systems and our grading practices. And he says it takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. So I want to close with that quote and just a few bits of information. Thanks for participating with us at this time. Our next step is actually to read and reflect on chapters 3 and 4. Sneakily, we're going to ask you before our next meeting in January to also